So Ben Salem, so Jerusalem, which is of course means city of peace, and that's probably the most ironically named city on the planet. Then you've got so they got the son of the city of peace, right?
Right.
So that's where they have landed. They're allowed to come on land if they have not shed blood for 40 days, which I talked about. The Eleusinian mysteries seem to be hooked into here, because you are not allowed to participate in the mysteries unless you're not shed blood. You're not killed anyone. Those are the two things. You had to speak Greek, and you had to not have killed anyone.
Okay.
So they kind of land in that, and then they just basically, after that, it's kind of an encounter with different people, and also there's another thing that hooks back into the mysteries of, so they, again, the biblical thing, they feel like they've been saved from the belly of the whale, and they feel like they're between death and life. I'm quoting directly here: between death and life, beyond both the old world and the new. So it's sort of back, they're in this liminal space of the sacred and about to embark on the initiatory journey.
Mm-hmm.
Then they find out they're in Ben Salem. They and that these people are Christians, and they ask, well, how'd you become Christians out here in the middle of nowhere? Well, it began in this incredible vision from the city of one of the cities, which is called Renfusa, and Renfusa means sheep-like. So you came back to the Christ as the good shepherd, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the people see this huge pillar of light in the sea
with a cross on top.
With a cross on top.
Mm-hmm.
So they go rowing out with a bunch of ships, and they can only get so far,
mm-hmm.
and then they're like blocked from getting any closer.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, the people who really run this place are basically of scientist priests,
mm-hmm.
philosopher priests.
The elites, the ruling class.
Yeah, they're very much elites.
The Fabian society is what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah. And so there's one. So the one of the priests is amongst these boats, and the first thing I thought of was, in the esoteric tradition, there's a thing called the ring pass knot. Have you heard of this?
I have, but I'm not that familiar with it.
Okay, well, basically, in your spiritual journey, we reach a point where you have to come to face with yourself and things, with the, sort of the bad side of yourself, in order to proceed.
Yeah.
Like your shadow sign.
So exactly. So they can't go forward. So they end up being so they're stuck. And then this priest, scientist, philosopher starts praying and humbling himself. It opens up. He's allowed to approach this pillar.
Mm-hmm.
It bursts into the firmament.
Starry firmament.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what's left is this cedar ark. So in this cedar ark comes floating in. So now you're going back to the Ark of the Covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is the new covenant, not the old covenant,
mm-hmm.
right? The ark was supposedly made of cedar, the Ark of the Covenant. So they comes in, they open it up, and there are a number of books, and a letter from the Apostle Bartholomew. Saint Bartholomew. And in these books are the books of the Gospels, mm-hmm. and some books that had not been written yet. So this supposedly occurs about 30 years after the ascension of Christ, so around the year 50, something like
mm-hmm.
that.
Right.
So could you say something about St. Bartholomew?
Well, it's interesting that he was known to be an exorcist. And what was the other thing about him? Now I have to go look at my notes. Well, you go ahead, and I'll find where.
So they bring the books. So they become converted on the spot to this pure form of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Right at the beginning of it. One of the interesting things about the books, so this maps back on the Pentecost again, was that no matter what language the people spoke, they read it in their own language. Mm-hmm. So it's just like the apostles going out and preaching. Mm-hmm. It was heard in their own language.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, so Bartholomew was a missionary who traveled to remote lands, and he had the ability to interpret dreams and revelations. He was the author of 2 books or gospels, and the symbol of pure religion in pre-Edenic, before the fall. These books were so.
Yes, so that's how that's established. So what's established in this place, in New Atlantis, was this sort of pre-Edenic pure version of Christianity. Mm-hmm. Next, they meet a Jew who, according to Bacon, is not like the Jews of Europe who hate Christ.
Right. I remember that. Yeah.
But you know, basically a Jew who knows his place.
He's a real Jew, not a
who knows to stay out of trouble. I don't know, but he's but also he talks about having some sort of original Kabbalistic works from Moses, which of course that's what everyone at the time thought the Corpus Hermeticum was. Mm-hmm. They thought that at the time they were actually written by Moses or written in the time of Moses and came out of Egypt, which is why. In Florence, they stopped translating Plato when they saw this because they thought they had the real old stuff, the original stuff.
Right.
And really, all of Giordano Bruno's works is based on this false assumption. He was looking to reestablish this sort of religious Egyptian pagan thing, which is what got him burned. Mm-hmm. So they have this encounter with this Jewish guy, which seems, I don't know, it's kind of an odd thing in there. And the last one of the things that this Jewish guy whose name is Jaobin or Wapin, Jaobin, and he goes on about how sexually pure that this island, this place is, Ben Salem is, and which is kind of, and then he goes on, and then they describe this whole service, this whole what do you call it? Just a big, not party, but a big festival that they have, where all of your progeny is laid out in front of you for people who achieve a certain number of progeny. Then you get to have this big festival, which is odd because 1, Bacon did not have any children,
right,
and 2, he was very likely gay, even according to a letter from his mother, who was complaining to Bacon's brother that he had all these Italian sailor boys, quote, laying around his couch and his bed.
Right, playing hide the bacon.
Yeah, exactly.
Find the bacon.
Right.
So Jaubin is an interesting name because when I ran across that, to me it was like it was a combination or a cipher for Jachin and Boaz, right? So you have Joabin, which is Boaz and Jachin sort of combined.
Right. So
he represents sort of this combination or reconfiguration of the twin pillars of mysteries. So he's a kind of this cipher who represents this reconfiguration of duality in some ways, and the keeper of mystery, because that's where theoretically the mysteries come from, right? So the story, if I haven't shared it before, is that Boaz and Jachin were these columns, and they were tethered together, and inside of these columns were rolls of papyrus or paper that essentially had the secrets of Atlantis sort of tucked away inside of them.
Where's that written?
You kind of float around.
Like a Masonic tradition.
So Boaz and Jachin they're tied together, and the reason why they're the twin pillars of mystery is because, and they're always represented, is because the scrolls from Atlantis were basically embedded in there.
Okay. And
they were watertight, right? So they eventually wash up on shore, and people were able to, I think it might have been, again, geographically, perhaps Egypt, right? That this is where this transfer of knowledge begins to take place. So as a result of that, these 2 pillars are personified as being these these pillars of knowledge, because
Mm-hmm.
that's where theoretically they came from, right?
And that was, are you done?
Yeah.
So that also maps on to the name of the the house is the Solomon's house.
Mm-hmm.
That's the house of these priests, this elite group that runs things.
Right.
And again, you can take Solomon as Sol, sun, a, and moon, sun and moon.
Sun and moon.
All right.
Yeah.
So again, you've got the duality, and this duality is important to Bacon. This duality of the spiritual and the material coming together, and he often runs them in as in terms of Gemini and things like that. That I guess one of the Gemini twins is eternal and one's not. I'm not exactly sure, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But so that maps perfectly upon what he's trying to show here. And so then eventually this priest shows up from the Solomon's house or whatever he is, an official, and apparently they haven't seen anybody from this house in 12 years. Mm-hmm. And he gets carried on a palanquin, so he's carried like, uber royalty, so this is not an equal society. This is definitely elitism going on. So he's just not just guys showing up and talking on the street. He's carried in, and he's attended by 50 young men wearing white linen.
Oh.
So that may have been like a little bit of a,
Sounds like somebody's having a bit of a fantasy there.
Yeah, it might have been a little bit of a fantasy for Bacon that he tossed in there. I don't know. It was written in the last year of his life. He wasn't young.
Right.
But that maybe that doesn't matter. So then this personage from this House of Solomon goes, and then the new-atlantis ends on with him discoursing, and basically it's a discourse on their version of science. Mm-hmm. And the thing is about their version of science that so they basically do everything European science does, but they do more and better. So they have, like, their music is microtonal, and they have all these extra smells, and this goes back to Bacon's empiricism. So empiricism is all the study is coming from the senses. So they're working with the senses, but they're doing it, in an extraordinary and full manner. But they also go pretty far, and they also have a dark side. It seems, they use poisons and raising dissections, revivification of the dead, and tortures in order to learn more about things, which is very
much in vogue and in practice today.
Very much 20th century and onward,
Right.
He talks about flying machines, submarines, which of course would have been known from the work of Da Vinci, who originally wrote that stuff.
Oh, very good.
And then they had one of their houses was a house of deceits. So they would practice lies so that they would know the truth.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So this is the science that is connected with Christianity, mm-hmm. And connected with this priesthood that illuminates this landscape, and that is considered by Bacon to be the ideal world. Mm-hmm. He didn't finish it. It ends by saying the rest wasn't basically done well enough to publish.
Right.
So his secretary edited it out from his papers, so we don't have the notes, which mm-hmm. would be nice at least to see where he was going to take it at the end. But it ends with this discourse by this priest, and they're all, like I said, they're all kissing his hem and his ring in his hand, and he's all, dressed up, and so so it's almost like Plato's Atlantis, where the philosopher king is running the show.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm curious that there's no mention of women, really. There's no women
mm-hmm.
active,
no,
except in the family ceremony, possibly.
Just mentioned, yeah.
But other than that, that's completely absent.
So,
Almost
so I
completely.
think that's a good enough take on it. And so that's supposed